right, hopefully you got to see the video about the bad date, and it was just an intro to ratio. Basically, a ratio is just a comparison of two quantities. So on your notes, we're going to write down ratio equals comparison of two quantities. And you can pause the video as needed if you need to catch up on the notes. A quantity is just another word for amount. So a ratio is comparing any two amounts. It can be anything. A ratio can be expressed in three ways. We saw on the video that it used a colon, the two little dots. The most common that we're going to use is fraction form. Now, ratios can be written in fraction form, but not all ratios are fractions. And we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. We can write it in fraction form using a colon, which are those two dots, or by using the word to. When we say a ratio, we say 3 to 5, and we use the word to whenever we're talking about ratios. So here's an example. And again, if you need to go back and if you need to pause and fill in blanks, you can as you go. Here's an example of girls and boys in Mr. Tolentino's class. As you can see, we have 4 girls and we have 6 boys. If we were to write the ratio of girls to boys, the ratio of girls to boys in fraction form, and we're going to put labels next to them, G for girls and B for boys, because we always want to include a word ratio. This is called a word ratio. It helps us keep everything straight, because as we move into proportions a little bit later, it's real important that we know which word is on top and which word is on bottom. So the ratio of girls to boys is 4 to 6. And just like a fraction, we can simplify ratios. So we can simplify this by 2, and our ratio is 2 to 3 in fraction form. Using a colon, we would have 2 to 3, and using the word to, we would have 2 to 3. Ratios are easiest to understand and use when they're in fraction form. That's because we are super good at fractions. We can simplify them, find equivalent fractions, we can divide them. We can do a lot with fractions. So ratios are easiest to understand and use when they are in fraction form. So we always simplify ratios. Okay, we simplify them, so we're looking at fraction form with smaller numbers if possible. All right, so I mentioned that ratios can be in fraction form, but they're not always fractions. And let's talk about why. Is the ratio in fraction form above actually a fraction? When we're comparing girls to boys, that is not actually a fraction. And the reason is because fractions compare, and you probably know this, compare a part to the whole. This ratio is part to part. We're comparing one part of the class to another part of the class. We're not comparing part of the class to the entire class. We could turn this into a part to whole relation, to a part to whole ratio or fraction by finding the total girls and boys. So how many girls do we have? We have 4. We have 6 boys. So how many total students are in that class? Well, 6 plus 4 is 10. So we could turn it into a part to whole ratio or fraction by finding the total kids. And we can write it like this. Let's say we do girls to class. There are 4 girls, and the class altogether is 6 plus 4 is 10, and we can simplify it by 2, and we get 2 to 5. So our fraction of girls is 2 to 5. And 2 to 5, that is also 40%, isn't it? So 40% are girls in this class. Okay? And also remember, this is called your word ratio. And we need to always have our word ratio when words are involved.